Good afternoon, everyone, or I guess I should say good morning, depending on where you're joining us from. My name is Kavitha Bindra, and I'm the Assistant Dean and Executive Director of Executive Education at the Yale School of Management, which means I oversee the non-degree learning portfolio at the school. This means that my great team will administer the Fellowship for Public Education Leadership, which is the successor program to the Broad Academy. And as part of my learning for this transition, I had the chance to attend a module of the Broad Academy in Philadelphia, which was pre-COVID, of course, and I've spent many hours with the Broad Center staff in LA that was focused on the Broad Academy. I've been honored to meet many Broad Academy alumni along the way, and I'm thrilled to be part of the program today. So I'd like to welcome you to the breakout session B, Learning from COVID, Returning to a New Normal, and preventing the stampede toward the status quo. I'll let our two amazing moderators provide more context for today's session. First, I would like to introduce Deborah Gist, who's a graduate of the Broad Academy class of 2008. She's a superintendent of public schools in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Prior to Tulsa, she served as Commissioner of Education in Rhode Island and was the first state superintendent of education for the District of Columbia. She began her career in education as an elementary school teacher in Fort Worth, Texas. Later, as a teacher in Tampa, Florida, she conceived, designed, and initiated a literacy program serving families in 108 elementary schools. In 2010, Gist was recognized as one of the Time 100 people who most affect our world, and as one of the Atlantic's brave thinkers, a designation that honors the year's most intrepid and original thinking. She received the Brian Bennett Education Warrior Award from Democrats for Education Reform, is a founding member of Chiefs for Change, is a Broad Academy Fellow, and is on the executive committee, the Partnership for Assessment of Readiness for College and Careers. Gist holds a bachelor's in early education from the University of Oklahoma, a master's in elementary education and curriculum from the University of South Florida, a master's in public administration from the Harvard University John F. Kennedy School of Government. We forgive you for Harvard, Deborah, and a doctorate in education from the University of Pennsylvania. I would also like to introduce Andrea Castaneda, a fellow from the Broad Academy class of 2014. She is the Chief Innovation Officer at the Tulsa Public Schools. Bringing families closer to schools, bringing schools closer to kids, and bringing kids closer to success have been the focus of Andrea Castaneda's career. As Chief of Fiscal Integrity and Statewide Efficiencies at the Rhode Island Department of Education, she made state-local collaboration a focus of her efforts in leading several projects, including the systematic redesign of the statewide school funding formula and negotiating collective bargaining agreements. She also has designed and led academic programs in secondary education, career and technical education, virtual learning, charter schools, and school turnaround. Her efforts help drive the state to post record high English, language arts, and mathematics results. She now serves the students and families of Tulsa Public Schools as Chief Innovation Officer. Please join me in welcoming Deborah Gist and Andrea Castaneda.
Thank you so much, Kavitha. And if you followed that, you can tell that Andrea and I have worked together both in Rhode Island and now here in Tulsa. And I'm so excited for us to have the chance, not just to share with you, but actually to engage with you. And if we can go ahead and start sharing the slides, and I'll tell you that the slide I want to focus on for just a moment is a warm welcome, and it's about gratitude. And you may have these social and emotional learning practices in your district as well, but we start our meetings and our gatherings with warm welcomes. And I want to do one quickly today. And first I want to start by just saying how grateful I am to the Broad Center for, we have a lot of academy and residents here in the district, and they're amazing people. And I'm just such a fan, and the keynote and the leadership stories were incredible. And I'm just excited that my friend Hansel is leading the center. So there's so many great things happening. That's my gratitude. I want to ask you to take a moment, pick up your phone, and send a quick text to someone in the Broad Network, a note of gratitude to say something that you admire about them, something that you have noticed that they're doing, something they've taught you over the years or recently, and just take that quick moment to share that moment of gratitude with a Broad colleague. And while you're doing that, we're going to keep on going in the interest of time. And I want to, so we'll go to actually slide 3. And on slide 3, this is just what we want to accomplish today. So we want to share some insights with you from our district. We want to have a discussion with you about whether this moment is a moment for disruption, a moment for reunion, someplace in between. And it's kind of like earlier in the meeting when we were asked about whether this is a moment or a movement. It's sort of related to that in the sense that it's how we look at that and how we're experiencing it. And there are actually some sub outcomes here. If you just keep clicking, they'll sort of emerge. It's a what do you call that? An active slide or whatever. So that's our question. But we also want to give you a moment to feel hopeful, to come out of this thinking about what together we can do, what each of us are doing in our roles to make change on behalf of children in our country or beyond. And then we have some materials that we'd like to share with you that I think will be really helpful for you. I hope will be. So we'll go on to slide 4. And I'll just keep doing my voiceover. So prior to the pandemic, I know that all of us have great things going on in our systems, in our work. But despite that, what we know is that overall as a system of schools, a system of schooling, that school as we knew them, school as we know them, they weren't working for most of our students. And particularly for our Black and Brown students, we just know that too often children, as they go through our systems, are actually learning to love learning less and less each year that they're in school. We lose too many of them along the way. And even the ones who stick it out and do everything we ask of them too often graduate unprepared for life after high school. And so so what we've done over the past is we've said, okay, but we know how to do school. And so we had this sort of narrow focus, a small aperture on what it meant to be in school. And it too often actually looked like the school that we all experienced. And so many of us are innovating and we're trying, but we have these schools, we have examples, but system-wide overall change has been so hard for all of us to accomplish. So too often we see school in the same way that we've always seen them, with separate courses and bells and textbooks and suspensions and school as we've known it. When the pandemic hit, everything changed and our aperture broadened. We had to completely rethink, just in a matter of hours, how school was going to look, how learning was going to happen, and we did it. We did it for all of our students in such a quick period of time. We broadened our view about, we had a larger aperture about our vision of what schooling could look like. So this afternoon, we want to engage you all as collaborators with us. We want to make sure that together we are open to powerful new change, not just for some schools, not just for some students, but for our entire systems. We want to make sure that we're keeping that aperture large before it rapidly closes back again. And we want to avoid the stampede to the status quo. The stampede to the status quo is actually a term that Andrea coined. And so I'm going to turn it over to her to take you through the next couple of slides.
Thank you, Deborah. First, hi, everyone. I wish I was actually seeing you. There's a bar stool at the corner of the bar in that lobby in LA that practically has my name on it during the forum, and I'm so sad to not be sitting in it, but I am glad to be with you virtually. So we are going to spend time together talking. That's part of the reason that Deborah and I are like steamrolling through the beginning, because the real value is in the time together. And so in December in Tulsa, we were like, wow, we have learned so much. We are working so hard and things are changing so fast. We have to take a minute now and start to collect and really codify that so that we can be ready for the things that are coming. And just like you, the things that are coming for us, we've got stimulus coming, we've got school planning, we've got to be ready for next year. There is a lot, and we want to be as wide-eyed but clear-eyed as possible about the work that's coming. Can you advance to the next slide? So as we were trying to do our preparation, we did two things that we're going to share with you. And there is a background folder that we'll share that has all of the reports that we generated in case they're useful. The two things we did, we looked to research and then interviewed, probably even people in this room, about 40 or 50 national partners to try to understand what was going to happen with COVID and what just generally might be happening in the future in public education. And then the other thing we did was we pulled back and asked ourselves, what did we learn from COVID that we want to hold on to? I'm not going to read this slide to you, but I'm just going to hit a few that felt especially helpful for us as we started to cascade this through our entire system. Prediction number 2, it's proven to be helpful to be saying to people, hey, we're going to still be in this. We're getting better, but masks and quarantine and isolation and social distance, it's not going to go away the moment that we are vaccinated. And we should be looking at a school year that right through the fall and perhaps even later is still going to be carrying those sorts of demands on us. And then the 5th one is the one that really is the heart of today's conversation. We have gone through a period of disruption historically. There is this surge of innovation that happens afterwards because the status quo has been broken down. And we're eager to see what kinds of practice changes and what kinds of ed tech changes could really push us to a new level of success, especially with the students who we've been least successful in reaching. And can you just go to the next slide?
So with those as our predictions, both with our own work here in our district, but also with those interviews and the research that we've done that Andrea mentioned, we also developed some insights. And again, not going to read it to you, we'll make this available, but just quickly. One thing is that too often we think that to have broad scale change, that we need a whole lot of planning time. And what we know now is that we actually can do a lot more than we think we can in a lot less time. And sometimes we just have to do it. We also know now so much better about ways that we can engage and communicate with our families. And I believe that this is actually one of the most important benefits, if we're ready to think about it that way, with all of the horrible death and so forth. But our families are our most important partners. And we are, I hope you are too, so much better now about how we engage and authentically and communicate differently with them. Also, we've talked about the scope and but what I want to say is that in our district, we have had a core value of equity for 5 years now. And one of the things we've struggled with is making sure that there's a real impact, that it isn't just rhetoric about justice and being anti-racist and anti-bias and so forth, but that there's real action. And so what we want to do is really focus on that and get a few things that we are having a real impact on that value. Our teachers are innovating, our schools are innovating during this time. We need to learn from them. We also want to make sure that we know that our kids have lost a lot of instruction during this time, whether they're in school or out of school or in and out, back and forth. Either way, this has not been a time of tremendous learning for most kids. But if we focus too much on just saying we've got to get them caught up with their literacy, we need to focus on math, we're going to lose a really important commitment to seeing them as a whole child and to engaging with our community. And then the last insight is going to transition us to the next part of our conversation.
All right, so we're doing these interviews, we're learning so much, and then we kind of realized that there is this quiet but really energetic debate that is playing out amongst systems leaders and national thinkers in our own cabinet, within our own teachers. And it is this question of whether or not next year is actually a year that is going to be terrifically productive for disruption, or whether next year is the year that we all really focus on reunion. And the rest of our time together is just going to be like going hard on that key question, because that is the strategy posture that we are all going to either decide intentionally or stumble into, but one way or another, it will set the tone for our next year. So you can see it's obviously not an either or, there is a scale there. And the question we're going to be exploring together in small breakout rooms is where do we fall? Where do we fall relative to the midline? Are we more on the disruption? Or are we more on the reunion side? Can you advance the slide?
Okay, so it might not be a surprise to you either if you know me or just based on what you've heard me say so far, but Andrea and I talked about this and decided I was going to sell this side of the spectrum, because it is a spectrum. So selling the disruption side of the spectrum, I would say that we have for far too long, my additions aren't in there, Andrea, it's okay. For far too long, we have not urgently done what we need to do at a broad scale for our students, and we will not get an opportunity like this ever again. Our students have experienced, our teachers have experienced, our parents have experienced school differently, where it happens, how they move through the learning, what do grades look like, how do we grade, how do we not grade, do grades matter, what do grades mean, do they mean something, do they mean nothing, the role of our teachers, who's the teacher of record, can I have a teacher who doesn't live within 1,000 miles of me, what does all of that look like? And for so many of our students, the system, as you know, and I know you agree with me, has not worked for them, and this is our chance to change it. In addition, the world has changed. Communication has changed, engagement has changed, technology has changed, the way we learn, access to Coursera, master classes. There are so many things that are completely different now than they were different when school as we know it was designed, and the pace of change has been too slow. Lastly, I'll say another example is that we have right now in our systems, really acute for us, I hope not as acute for you, we have really big teacher shortages. And so too often we solve those by, working within our same system and trying to get more creative, but not doing it differently. It's another example of where we have a huge opportunity for creative collaboration among us that can bring real benefits and just huge opportunities to our students. So Andrea is going to sell the other side of this spectrum.
I'm gonna sell the other side. I also want to respond quickly to Maria's point. These aren't truly dichotomous. Obviously, there's a little bit of theater going on, but the point is, like, let's explore the balance that we've got to strike when we come together in our teams and plan next year. Okay, so selling the other side. We have students who have experienced, actually, in some ways, really acute amounts of trauma. And also, we have some students who have had exacerbated and sustained trauma. When we come back, what they actually need most to get back into the cognitively powerful space of being able to learn is to be able to have a school setting that's stable and staff that are able to really focus on their wellness and support their transition back in. Reestablishing the sense of community in our schools is prerequisite to any of the other ambitions we hold. And if we underestimate how hard this has been on our families, on our kids, and on our teachers, what we're really doing is exercising a certain amount of privilege and maybe even hubris in guessing or presuming on their behalf how many disruptions should be happening next. What there is a tremendous thirst for stability and familiarity. And that is totally human. It is not faulty. It is not wrong. It is what we all are hardwired to need psychologically. And schools are one of the most important places to deliver that. When we come back, reestablishing trust, reestablishing community, and helping our teachers be ready to be the frontline absorbers of trauma and creators of trust and community is actually the most important school, educational, and social and emotional benefit that we can offer our kids and our community. All right, so there's the other side, performed. The healing has to come before disruption.
Allison Fansler is here from KIPP. And I want to, if she, hopefully she's ready, I would love to just turn it to her.
I'm here. I don't know if I can be, I'm not seen and heard, which might be the, which
we can see and hear you.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, hi everyone. And I see some familiar names in the participant list. And I'm from KIPP DC, and I'm joining you from what feels like a really surreal place between pandemic and all of the activities that our whole country's experienced this summer through racial justice fights, and now a national security crisis that has our city feeling really strange. So it's a good place to be in community for me. I think I didn't participate as much in our small group, and I kind of wanted, we had someone who's an active teacher in the group, which really helped us understand both the differences in how different age students experience disruption relative to healing, and how different communities can think about it differently. I know in DC, we had the benefit of the last thing we did before this pandemic is that we were in a planning process that really reoriented our entire organization around family and teacher input, from what had been a very top-down kind of model that we sort of said, here's how we work. And we had gone through a real process in our community to refocus our organization around teacher and family input, which has served us really well in that trust building and that healing space, as much as we can keep that happening in this time, so that when we are able to do that, then we are able to build out the rigorous instruction and connect with people. But it's been very clear to us that relationships and healing and that sense of community and trust has to be first for us to do anything. I will say, in thinking about going back, we have found a lot of optimism in seeing things that we have changed, that we thought were sacred, that we now know are done better in different ways. And that, you know, everything from the way we do community engagement, the way we do family engagement, the way we know that certain students respond better in this environment than they did in our previous environment. And so I think we're right at the stage now of figuring out in the stop, start, keep model of thinking about things. What do we want to start when we go back that's different? What do we want to stop doing? And what do we want to really keep and build on? And so, there's lots of specifics under there, but on that spectrum, that false sort of dichotomy that we were all fighting against, I know that for us, this notion of healing is paramount, both for the adults that we're working with and the students that we're working with. And I see some of the faces here of folks who had been at KIPP DC who were there to help us make that shift. So I appreciate that. I'll hand the mic back to you two.
Thank you, Allison, so much. Please do stay safe and well in our nation's capital. We also wanted to hear from Roberto Padilla from New York. And I'm going to let you say the name of your district, Roberto.
Happy New Year, everyone. Roberto Padilla here, Superintendent of the Newburgh and Lawrence City School District, a little north of New York City. And so when I think of this concept of disruption, I'm quickly reminded of some work that we've been engaged in for the last several weeks that I quickly shared in the breakout room. And that's this notion of the Stockdale paradox. And so for those of you who are familiar with the Stockdale paradox, I'm just reminded of how often as system leaders, we're expected to be optimistic for our community, right? That just comes with the role. and it comes with the work. But in that, there's a lot of pressure and a sense of urgency. And while many of us may be anxious, may be eager to embrace disruption, because I do believe this pandemic has opened up some opportunities that otherwise would not have made themselves available if we were just continuing as status quo. If we don't stop and take some intentional time to reflect, and so Allison indicated the start, stop, keep process, there needs to be a process. And whatever it is that you're willing to put in place, I think is important. I think the point here is ensuring that you provide time in your organization to reflect on the work that folks have been engaged in. And this is not to say there's one stakeholder group more important than any other, but if I could strongly encourage, please tap into your students and lift their voices. They're the users of all of the decisions that we end up making. And that's exactly what we did. We created student town halls. We were meeting with students on a weekly basis and learning from them exactly what the impact of the pandemic was, the impact of the decisions we were making, whether it was remote, hybrid, or what have you. Their voices led to some significant operational changes that we felt needed to happen in order to ensure they were having some level of success. And I think we all can agree that there are children who they're struggling. And so if we don't tap into their voices, we're just gonna keep moving forward under tremendous pressure and an urgency to do something. So that's kind of where we're at right now. We're excited. We've created design teams to embrace some opportunities for the future, just so that way we're being super intentional. But we're also taking some moments to just reflect what's going well and where we can get some deeper learning in.
Thank you, Roberto, so much. Thank you to both of you, Allison and Roberto, for your reflections. I'm going to ask Andrea, I'm going to ask you to walk folks through the resources that we're going to provide, and then I have a quick optimistic closure.
Absolutely. If you actually, if you can pull up the deck, that'll be helpful, but it's not necessary. I will just rechat it again so you guys can find it. You know, honestly, we just share these in the spirit of we're all in this together. I'm not sure they're useful for them, but it'll give you a lead if you want to start having a version of this conversation in your own system. There's a full report of predictions and insights. We've found it very helpful to start cascading that through our internal team, starting with the superintendent's cabinet all the way down to building leaders. It's building their stamina for next year and helping them do their own clear-eyed planning. There's also, we just dumped right in their sample decks and the meaning-making protocols. They were put together quickly because nobody's got time, but I figure in the spirit of it's all out there for you, please have at it, do whatever you want with it, and hopefully it can be a shortcut for some of you. Deborah, I'll hand it back to you.
Thanks, Andrea. So I'm going to scrap the optimistic closure that I had, and I'm going to say that this optimistic closure is compliments of Dr. Padilla. I'm a big fan of the concept of the Stockdale paradox and have found it so valuable at so many different moments in my leadership experience. And so let's just go back to those reflections that he shared with us and say that I am completely confident that as folks who wake up every morning ready to serve kids and make a difference for them, that we can confront our brutal realities, be crystal clear that our systems are not doing what they need to do as a whole for our students. Confront that brutal reality at the same time that we remain completely hopeful, completely confident, completely faithful, and with the true belief that we have the ability, we know so much about what is working for our students, and that together we can truly bring about that change. I'm so glad you guys joined us for this conversation. Thank you. It was great to have a moment to talk with you in those breakout sessions, and I hope these materials are useful for us. please do stay in touch with us. We are on this journey together. And thanks again, Andrea, for being such an incredible team member.
Thank you, everyone. I'm fixing permissions.
Great job.
Thanks, you guys. So I think we're supposed to stop right about right now. So I don't know. We just go back to that other link, right? Yeah. Okay. Thanks, you guys. See you over there.
Thank you.